Thank you for watching today's DAMES webinar. Today we are focusing on how to interrupt stress. At DAMES, we realize that stress is ever present in the parents of children with disabilities, and our goal is to provide them with educational resources so that we can empower parents to make informed decisions for their child. Sometimes this also includes doing webinars that are all about different stress relieving techniques. This webinar is an example of one of those. Enjoy. Hello, Dames members. Thank you so much for coming and for watching this August webinar. Today we are so thrilled to have Claire Loge. Am I saying your last name right?
Luge, like the winter sport.
Luge.
Yeah.
Okay, Claire Luge here from Prevent Child Abuse Arizona. I had the privilege of watching one of her other webinars, and I was absolutely blown away by not only just the content that was in there, but also her style and just the amount of information that she disseminates, especially when it comes to stress and different ways of relieving it. And I know that right now we're all in the middle of this global pandemic, and we as mothers of children with disabilities, we are already usually stressed, and now with all of this other stuff on top of it, I know that the community is feeling a lot more of the stress. And today I'm really excited about learning different ways that we can help us interrupt that stress and kind of get back into kind of like a wise mind, which is what the focus of this talk is. And this subject is just so very near and dear to my heart. And Claire, I really want to thank you so much for being here today.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me to give a presentation to this wonderful group of women. Thank you, whoever's watching. Thank you for keeping yourself well so that you can be present and and uh, and nurturing parents to your children. Uh, that is absolutely critical for the well-being of our entire society. So thank you for just being and for caring about yourself enough to watch this webinar and to connect to sources of information like this. So I'm going to get started. So again, my name is Claire Luge. I am the Executive Director of Prevent Child Abuse Arizona. We are a statewide nonprofit organization that is dedicated to strengthening families and protecting children. And specifically, we protect children by strengthening families, because to really protect children and to prevent abuse from ever happening in the first place, it takes supporting families and making sure that families have what they need in order to nurture their children. That's basically what child abuse prevention is. So I'm thrilled to be here and to present on getting back into your wise mind and how to interrupt your stress response. This webinar, so the reason I'm able to be here today is thanks to support from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona and the NARBA Institute that is giving us some funding to support these kinds of public webinars. And I also want to mention that a lot of the content of this presentation comes from the Arizona Trauma Institute and the work of Dr. Eric Gentry and Bob Roten. Check them out. They have really great trainings on everything from compassion fatigue to training for therapists on working with people with trauma. They have a really excellent long form training. This is kind of a bite-sized version of some of what they teach. So my first question for you is, what are some of the negative effects of stress on your life? Think about how stress affects you. What are those negative effects? And I'm sure that you can think of many of them. Oftentimes when I ask this question to people, they'll say things like, well, overeating or undereating, lack of sleep, insomnia, irritability, depression, feeling really snippy, relational problems, inability to feel present, just a sense of physical pain or fatigue. So if those are some of the things that you might relate to, you're not alone. The reality of it is, When human beings experience too much stress, we experience negative effects. And some of those things are very common and they're shared between human beings. So, why? Why is it that when there's an overwhelming amount of stress, that we tend to get these similar symptoms? It's because of the way that the human brain is formed. So we have two main parts of our nervous system. We have the parasympathetic nervous system and we have the sympathetic nervous system. We all have this. The parasympathetic nervous system is all about learning, planning, and processing. It's largely located in this area of your brain, so this frontal cortex. It's also where our executive function is, things like impulse control or making long term choices or empathy, communication, basically your sense of wisdom and your sense of value. That's all located right here, and it's part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And this part of the brain is activated when you feel safe. Then we have the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is what's activated when you are experiencing those negative symptoms. So that is our fight, flight, or freeze system. And it's there to help us survive. So it evolved to help us respond to threats. Like, for example, if there's a tiger in this room that looks like it's going to eat me, I need to have a sympathetic nervous system so that I can either fight the tiger. Don't know how great I would be at that, but run from the tiger, so flight, or freeze, so the tiger doesn't see me. But that sympathetic nervous system is what is turned on and creates those fight, flight, or freeze behaviors. And when you think about the negative impacts of stress, those things are results of this sympathetic nervous system being overactive. So here's another metaphor for our two systems that exist. Does anyone know who these are? So this one on the left is Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner is a Marvel character from Marvel Comics, and he is, a smart, compassionate, calm, relationship-oriented person. Right? He's very intelligent and calm, and this is the symbol for the parasympathetic nervous system. And then we have the sympathetic nervous system. And then we have this guy over here. This is the Incredible Hulk. And the Hulk is who Bruce Banner becomes when he gets too angry. So, what are the symptoms of the Hulk? The Hulk just smashes things, basically. The Hulk doesn't have particularly good communication skills, doesn't have a really good grasp of language. He just smashes things. He's irritable, he's angry, he doesn't care about things like property damage or relationships. This is the Hulk. So we all have a Bruce Banner brain, and we all have a Hulk brain. And if you want, you can even name your Hulk brain so you have a term for it. But you have one. I have a friend who names her Hulk brain Loretta. Anyways, I'm sorry if anyone watching this is named Loretta, but that's what she calls her. She's like, oh, Loretta's coming out today. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you some space because Loretta's coming out. We all have this Hulk brain. Okay, so the Bruce Banner brain, our safe brain, our learn, plan, and process brain, that activates when you feel safe. And here are some of the symptoms of you when you are in the Bruce Banner brain. Here's what you can do. You can have focus and intention. You can have logic. You can reason. You can plan for the future. You can be flexible, make sound judgments, have empathy towards others, have a sense of intuition, attune your communication with others. You can balance your emotions and self-regulate. You can pause before reacting. Imagine that. You can have a sense of identity and purpose. You can have a sense of morality. So looking at this list, it's probably who you want to be, right? You wouldn't want to give up any of these things. But the thing is, when you're in Hulk mode, you give up these things. When we're in survival mode, we don't do these things. That's because when we're in survival mode, we don't care about the long-term future. We care about surviving right now. But in order to really get through life, and be the kind of people that we want to be, we need to be in Bruce Banner brain. So how do we get back into Bruce Banner brain if we're feeling like we're in Hulk brain? This webinar is about that. So what happens when the Hulk brain is activated? The Hulk brain is activated when you perceive a threat. And perceive is an important word right now because the reality of today is that we may be perceiving threats that are not actually threats to our life. So, for example, if I receive a text from my boss and it says, Claire, can you call me right now? Okay, imagine receiving a text from your boss saying, can you call me right now? What is the reaction? What are you feeling in your body when you get a text like that, right? My heart would start to grip, my muscles would start to tense, and I would probably start to breathe a little bit faster. But is that an actual threat to my life? No, this text is literally not, it's not going to literally kill me, right? But my brain is perceiving a threat to my survival, even though it's not really there. So my Hulk brain is starting to turn on, and those are some of the symptoms of the Hulk brain starting to tense up, starting to get anxious. That is my sympathetic nervous system or Hulk brain being turned on, even though, again, there's no actual threat to my life, but my body is reacting as if there is. There is a threat. So here are some of those symptoms of being in the Hulk brain. Let's see if you have experienced any of these ever. Aggression, irritability, anger, defensiveness, reactiveness, being impulsive, hostile, irrational, self centered, having poor focus, being fidgety, or freezing, like not really knowing what to do next or just going blank. Yeah, these are some of the symptoms of being in Hulk brain. You've probably experienced your children being in Hulk brain too. And we all have a Hulk brain. These are the symptoms of being in Hulk brain. So here's more of what happens when the Hulk brain gets turned on. Your body releases a fiery cocktail of hormones. And in that fiery cocktail, it's not the good kind of cocktail. It's not good or bad, but it's a cocktail of hormones, and in that cocktail is cortisol and adrenaline. And here are some of the symptoms of cortisol. When your body is flooded with cortisol, it reduces your ability to form a sequential memory. And think about that, because a lot of what we learn and a lot of what we're expected to learn in school involves a sequence of things. So learning how to write the English language, for example, or how to do math equations, or really anything that we're learning usually requires knowing how to put things in a sequence. Cortisol reduces your ability to do that. So it's not that someone lacks intelligence if they're unable to do these things in a sequential way. It may be that they have a lot of cortisol in their system and just makes it harder. Cortisol also reduces your executive functioning. So it literally just takes energy away from being in your frontal cortex, that one that is your wise mind, where all of your executive functioning, like it's the executive director of your brain. And it's what helps you make those long-term choices or act in the ways that you want to or within your values or controlling your impulses. Like there are things that we want to do right now that may not be good for our future. Things like speeding or eating the entire chocolate cake rather than just one slice. Or, it's those kind of things that we have the impulse to do, but we have to control that impulse for our long-term future. That is affected by cortisol. You're less able to do that when you have cortisol. Also, adrenaline is in that fiery cocktail. And adrenaline increases your fear, your anxiety, your agitation, and your emotional memory, meaning that you may not remember the details of what happened, but you remember how it made you feel, and it disturbs your sleep. So, have you ever been unable to sleep because of stress? It's because of adrenaline. Adrenaline is coursing through your body. Because it makes sense. If your body's in Hulk mode, it's there because it's trying to help you survive because it thinks that there's a threat to your life. And so you don't want to sleep when there's a threat to your life. You want to be awake so you can deal with the threat, right? So it's keeping you awake because it thinks that there's a threat to your life. Okay. All right. And it also reduces your problem solving skills and your ability to follow through to goals. Okay. So this is just symptoms of being in the Hulk brain. So we have both of these systems, my friends. We have the Bruce Banner brain and we have the Hulk brain. It's important that we have both those systems. But the point is to have the Bruce Banner brain be dominant. We want that one to be in charge versus the Hulk brain being in charge. Because when the Hulk brain is in charge, here's what happens. When the Hulk brain is dominant, all of those symptoms that I described earlier about being in the Hulk brain happen. But here are some of the other signs that the Hulk brain may be dominating: anxiety, depression, dissociation, numbing, addictions, self injury, suicidality, compulsivity, constant sadness, withdrawing from others, or reluctance to explore. Those are symptoms of being in Hulk brain dominance. Another way to look at the Bruce Banner brain and the Hulk brain is that Bruce Banner is you and the Hulk is your guard dog. Okay? You don't want the guard dog to run your life. The guard dog has a very specific purpose and a very rare specific purpose, hopefully. Okay? And I want that guard dog to be dominant if there is an actual threat to my life. So if someone breaks into my house and is trying to hurt me, go guard dog, like go and do your job, bite that person, right? You can be dominant in that situation. But in all other situations, I want to be the master of that guard dog. You don't want the guard dog to be the master of you. But so often the Hulk brain or the guard dog is dominant. Why? What would cause the Hulk brain to be dominant? Well, the Hulk brain is made dominant through trauma. Trauma is a term that's kicked around a lot. Trauma is often considered a specific event that happens, like if you were assaulted or if you were in a car accident. That can be traumatic, that can be a trauma. But it doesn't just have to be one big event that traumatizes you. It can also be a series of stressful events, also known as chaotic environments. So, an environment in which you are unable to get relief from your stress uh, because the stress is always there, or you are unable to cope with it because you don't have a coping, that causes body to have trauma. Because what trauma is a system overwhelm. So trauma is caused when your body's stress response system is overwhelmed and you cannot cope with it. And it's important to note that not all stress needs to be trauma. So we're going through a pandemic right now, and a lot of parents are asking me or are sharing with me, I'm really worried that this pandemic is going to traumatize my child. And I'm like, don't worry. Uh, Seriously, because if you're asking that question, your child is probably not going to be traumatized. And here's why. A child can go through stress. In fact, it's important for children to be able to go through stressful situations. And the key term there is go through. As a parent, it is your role to be able to guide them through stressful situations and teach them how to cope. It's because in life, they're going to need to deal with stressful situations, and they're going to need to deal with stressful situations on their own in adulthood. But with your guidance, they're better able to understand stress, understand their emotion, and then get techniques from you from how to deal with that. Like, how do you control your impulses when you're feeling irritable or aggressive? How do you stop yourself from hitting someone when that's really what you want to do? How do you, calm yourself when you're going through a lot of stress? These are things that you can teach them. So the pandemic does not need to be causing trauma to children. So let's not assume that this is going to be traumatic to everyone. It may be traumatic to children who are not getting help from one constant, nurturing, consistent adult like you. If they're not getting that help to kind of deal with the uncertainty and the stress and the difference that this pandemic is causing, then yeah, it may be causing a trauma because their systems are overwhelmed. But a child does not need to be traumatized by something, even something that's really terrible, if they're getting help to deal with it. And the same thing with you, same thing with adults. You can go through something really horrible, but if you have support to be able to deal with it, to be able to navigate the impacts of that stress, it does not need to cause long-term trauma in your body. So trauma is not inevitable. Okay, so why is it that trauma causes Hulk brain dominance? It's because of the blessing and the curse of the human brain. And the blessing of the curse of the human brain is that we learn really well. So, what is so characteristic about human beings is that we are so good at learning. And what we do is we learn based on our experiences and witnessing the experiences of others. And we use that information to make long term plans. Okay? Like one kind of silly example is so I'm going to Thailand, hopefully, in October. We'll see. Okay, I have tickets to go to Thailand. Who knows if that's happening? But regardless, I've never been to Thailand. But I know that I'm probably going to be safe in Thailand, that I will be able to survive there because there is good food there and because there is, there's Airbnbs and and there's sites that I can see. Anyways, even if I have not been to Thailand before, I know that I will be able to survive there. And it's not based on my own experience, it's based on the experience of others. I'm like researching it, right? This is a silly example, but basically, we take information and we make predictions about our ability to do something in the future. That is characteristic of human beings. No other animal does that to the capacity that we do. We really take information and we make predictions. And because of that prediction, we can make plans. And because of those plans, we can create a whole bunch of things. We can launch ourselves into the future by visioning it based on the information that we know. That's the blessing of the human brain. It's incredible. That's why we've been able to build so much. Okay? But it's also the curse of the human brain. Why? Because we learn really, really well. So, for example, this is another silly example. But let's take this Sharpie. I have a Sharpie right here. Let's imagine that when I was a kid, I had a really mean uncle. And he used to have a Sharpie that he kept in his pocket. This is a fake story, by the way. But he used to have a Sharpie in his pocket. And whenever I walked by, he used to poke me in the stomach and say, you're getting really, really fat. Okay, just imagine that. That's emotional abuse, right? So imagine that. Right now, how do you think that my body reacts to seeing a Sharpie? Probably it has a reaction, right? Why? It's because my body has learned to associate the Sharpie with pain or with threat, with something that is uncomfortable. And because my body is so good at learning from my experiences, it will react to objects that are associated with past painful experiences. So we learn really well from our painful past learning. But the thing with that is this Sharpie right now is not actually threatening to me. But if it turns on my Hulk response, that Hulk response makes me unable to be in my Bruce Banner response. Because again, when you're in Hulk mode, you cannot also be in Bruce Banner mode. In order to be in Bruce Banner mode, you have to calm the Hulk mode, right? So what this does is it triggers me. And that trigger actually makes me unable to do things like impulse control or long-term future planning. And it makes me anxious. It takes away my ability to function in the ways that I want to. So that's the curse of the human brain, that we're so good at learning that we start to associate things that have been painful in our past, and we start seeing those threats everywhere. So another example, check out this guy right here, this shark. Who here would be perfectly comfortable seeing this shark swim up to you if you were swimming in the ocean? Probably none of you, right? Yikes. But another question is, who here has been actually hurt by a shark? I'm assuming none of you, okay? So why is it that you would be uncomfortable or that your Hulk response would go on if you saw this shark? Maybe you've watched Jaws. Maybe you have seen a media story about a shark attack. So even if you have not personally experienced something, you are learning from the experiences of others. And you're even learning from fictional stories like Jaws, which is a fictional story, okay? But still, your body, because it saw it, it's like, that is threatening, that will eat me, turn on your Hulk response. And the thing is, because we are so exposed to media and to stories and to experiences of pain, we start seeing threats everywhere. So, another question to consider is, do you think that it is more likely for people to let their children play outside now or 30 years ago? When I ask that question, everyone knows it's 30 years ago. But did you know that it's actually safer for children right now? There are less kidnappings, there are less murders, there are less of those kinds of crimes. So it's statistically safer to let your children play outside now. It is. But yet you're like, nah, I'm not going to let my kids play outside, on the street. Why? Because you've been exposed to so many stories of kidnapping and murder and all these things. And how? Because we're in touch with literally all of the media at all times. We have this machine that is exposing us to literally every painful story possibly imaginable. So we are constantly perceiving threats, and our Hulk systems are constantly being turned on. That's not great, because in order to really solve our problems and to be the kind of people that we want to be, we need to be in Bruce Banner mode. So how do we get ourselves out of Hulk mode, the shark mode, to Bruce Banner mode? This is about that. This is another example that experiences build the brain. So it's really important in childhood to help develop that Bruce Banner brain in children, because this is a diagram. It's not a diagram, it's a PET scan, actually. It's an actual scan of two brains. This over here on the left side is a healthy 2-year-old brain, just two-year-old. And this is an abused brain. And really, it's a neglected brain. It's a 2-year-old Romanian orphan. And so check out this region right here. So red means it's most active. This right here is where the Hulk brain is largely located. So because experiences build the brain, and brain connections are formed based on the experiences that you have in childhood, this child has had most of their experience in Hulk mode. So they have a really robust Hulk brain. And look over here. This is that frontal cortex. That's the one that is about learning, planning, and processing and executive functioning. In order to build this part of the brain in children, you have to calm this part of the brain. You have to be calm in order to build the executive functioning. And in order to help a child be calm, it requires one consistent, nurturing adult. That's it. This child on the right did not have that. And you can tell. Okay. Here's another way to look at stress and your stress response. This is called the Yerkes-Dodson curve. And I love, whipping this out at parties. I like to explain stress responses to people. But this is the curve, the relationship between human stress and human performance. And performance can mean anything. It can mean being able to communicate clearly, or doing a task like your job, or really being able to be on and to be able to be focused. That's what performance is, whatever you want to do. And so this is stress on this x-axis, and this is performance on the y-axis. So as you can see right here, when you have low stress, you actually don't perform very well. That's because stress is energy. So you need a little bit of energy, you need a little bit of energy, a little bit of stress in order to perform well at your peak. Your peak here is when you have like a mid-level of stress, really a mid-level of energy. And an example of stress is having an interest in something. Your body feels stress, okay? When you're interested in something. Again, stress is energy. Stress is usually a term that's like, oh, negative. It's not. Stress is just a thing. If you have too much stress, that's when it becomes distress. But you need a little bit of stress in order to be on. Like, for example, if I had just rolled out of bed before giving this presentation, I would have had low energy, like I didn't have enough coffee or eat whatever. I would probably present like this. Okay, good morning, everyone. So today we're going to talk about stress and performance. Okay, so imagine if I gave the whole webinar like that, right? I don't have enough stress in my body, so I need to be a little bit more animated in order to perform well, right? So you need a little bit and to be in your comfort zone. And honestly, if children are bored, it's because they don't have enough stress. They don't have enough interest, right? So you want to get them stressed so that they can perform at their peak. But then if you're already at your peak and you're performing well and you keep on getting stressors, like let's say I get another email and then I get a text from, again, my boss saying, can we please talk? Yeah. Or like someone knocks on the door and then, another demand comes on me. Then I start to go down this curve. I start getting fatigued, exhausted, and if stress keeps on accumulating, I break down. And that's the case for all human beings. All right. This is not just like a flawed human being. We're all, this applies to all of us. So if we're waking up and we're already exhausted, it's probably because we have a lot of stress already there. This is the Yerkes-Dodson curve. And you can even use this, gosh, with your partner, with your friends, or even with your older children. Like, where are you on this curve? Are you doing pretty well? Are you really bored? You don't have enough energy right now? What can we do? Are you like right here? Because the thing is, if they're already right here, or if you're already right there, you don't want to add another thing because that's going to make you go down the curve and you're going to perform less well, right? So if you're working with someone and they're right here, you need to get them to calm down in order to get them to perform well. And performing can be whatever it is. But if someone's right here, you actually want to give them something else. You want to give them a little bit more stress, a little bit more interest. Like when I give presentations live, if I see my audience starting to slip, maybe they're nodding a little bit, or it's in the afternoon and so they have low energy. I try to get even more animated, and so I'm stressing them a little bit more. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start because I'm trying to get energy in them. I'm trying to stress them. And so not all stress is bad. It's important to understand stress. So here's where the Bruce Banner and the Hulk are. So Bruce Banner is in your peak. The Hulk is in this exhaustion, fatigue, breakdown. Okay, so like I said, how do we get from Hulk mode, which is not great for us, and it's not the people that we want to be. We don't want to be these angry, irritated, overeating, lack of sleep, Hulks. You don't want to be in Hulk mode. Can we all agree? I mean, no one really wants to live in Hulk mode. It's not particularly comfortable to be Hulk either. We want to be in Bruce Banner mode. But like I just said, we're constantly being bombarded by threats, like by the media, by like the pandemic that's just like hanging over our head, by the stress of parenting, the threats are always there. So how do we get back into our Bruce Banner mode? Because Bruce Banner is really who is going to solve the problem. It's not going to be Hulk. You don't actually solve problems through the Hulk. The Hulk is designed to help you survive. But that's not really going to help for long term. It's maybe good for 5 seconds. So you want to be in the Bruce Banner mode. Here's how we do that. We confront threats or perceived threats with interoception and relaxation. I'm going to define what that means. Interoception is having a felt sense of your own body. So when you are experiencing stress, or even just right now, I invite you to just scan your body internally. How does it feel? Check in with it. Check in from your toes all the way up to your crown. What do you feel? Do you feel tension? If you feel tension, just release it. When you release tension that you find, it's very likely that you just found some tension. Maybe it was in your shoulders, maybe it was in your neck, maybe it was in your knees, or maybe it was in your pelvic area or your abdomen. I mean, we have tension. The reason why our muscles are tense is because muscles tense up in reaction to the Hulk mode. When your brain goes into Hulk mode, even when it starts to, it gets ready to fight, to fly, or to freeze. What is characteristic of those three things? Muscle tension. If I'm going to fight a tiger, which I don't recommend, and I would definitely lose, but I would start to tense, right? To start fighting. If I need to run from a tiger, I would start to tense because it takes muscles to be able to run. And if I want to freeze so the tiger doesn't see me, that's literally just muscle freezing, right? Muscle tension. So our muscles tense up in reaction to threats because of the Hulk mode. But luckily, we have control over our muscles. So when we consciously scan our bodies and release them, we are sending a signal back to our brain that says, stop being in Hulk mode, go back into Bruce Banner mode. We're safe. Isn't that cool? So it's sending a signal back to your brain saying, please stay in Bruce Banner mode. And the thing about this is you can't just do this once and then be in Bruce Banner mode for the rest of the day. It takes practice and it takes like a constant checking in, scanning, releasing. And sometimes 5 seconds later, your shoulders are right back up there. Why? Because you just perceived another threat. You're still in a threat. So again, calm. And this is something that you can do before you go and do something that's challenging. If your kid is having a tantrum, right, or is having a challenging behavior, before going to act to manage that, scan, release. That helps you stay in Bruce Banner mode, which is who you need to be in order to deal with that tantrum, right? Because your Hulk mode, if you're in Hulk mode, it's actually not helping your kid be in Bruce Banner mode. You have to be in Bruce Banner mode in order to get your kid in Bruce Banner mode. All right, so sometimes I do this like 100 times a day. I used to wear this bracelet. You can see it. It says resilient, and it's also bright yellow. I used to keep it on my wrist, and whenever my eye caught it, like whenever I saw it, on my wrist, it would be a reminder, a cue to me to scan and release. And it takes 2 seconds just to scan your body and just release the tension that you find. And it's just a cue for me to like keep myself back in Bruce Banner mode. So that's just muscle release. That's the first suggestion that I have for you today. So, and another note about this, if you are going through a ton of stress, like if you are down here in the curve, like if you're going through exhaustion and like you're super, super irritated and you have like tons of stress, these techniques I'm going to share with you are not going to solve that and automatically get you back into Bruce Banner mode. So if you're just wildly stressed out of your mind, you can't just release your muscles and have it be magically okay. So it kind of helps you jump from here back to the comfort zone. It's really catching yourself when you're going over the curve. But if you're down here already, what you need to do is discharge energy, because again, stress is energy. And if you're down here, you have too much energy within your body, too much stress. So how do we discharge energy? We discharge energy through breath, sound, and movement, preferably all three. One of the ways that our bodies naturally does that is by crying. Seriously. So crying, I mean, if you think about it, it's breath, sound, and movement, because you're convulsing, really. And that's your body's natural response to trying to release stress. And chances are you feel better after you cry. And that's why it's getting it out. So, what are some other ways that you can get it out when you're feeling stressed out of your mind? Some people will dance or run or sing or sometimes, sometimes like if I need to vent, like venting really works for me, where I'm just like, I just have a friend hold space for me, and I just what I call it is swamping. I just swamp them. I'm like, I swamp that today feels so like I hate everything today. And blah, 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 blah. Like I'll really just get into it, and I'll just like, bleh, like completely word vomit onto them. And their job is just to hold the space for me, and then I hold the space for them so they can just vent. That is really helpful to discharge for me. And then after I get it out, I feel better and I feel more self-regulated. And that's really what the purpose of it is. Because I don't want to be in that uncomfortable Hulk mode stress. I'm not the best version of myself when I'm in that mode. I'm like hating on people. I don't want to do that. So, anyways, what are some ways that you might be able to discharge when you're really feeling tons of stress? All right. So here are those techniques I'm gonna talk about. The first one, like I said, is just a scan and release. Scan your body and release. It takes 2 seconds, not even, right? Just releasing the muscle tension that you find. And again, what that does is it sends a signal to your brain that you're safe. Please go back into Bruce Banner mode. The second technique I'd like to share with you is a similar version of the muscle relaxation, but it's something you can do with kids. It's the wet noodle game. Really, what the wet noodle game is pretending that you are a wet noodle. So basically, it is releasing all the muscles you can possibly find and pretending that you're a noodle, a cooked piece of pasta. So what you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to count to 10, and or I'm going to count down from 3. And then for 10 seconds, we're going to pretend that we are cooked noodles, okay? 3, 2, 1, cooked noodle. And then you flop over all the muscles and you're like, okay, like release the muscles in your face, release the muscles in your feet, release the muscles in your belly. Like this is a way for you to get your kids to release their muscle tension and send a signal back to their brain to be in Bruce Banner mode. And it's also funny. Okay. Another technique is called the peripheral drift. And this is based on the concept that when we are in Bruce Banner mode, when we're in our safe space, our peripheral vision is engaged. You can actually see details or really notice your peripheral vision. Versus when you're in Hulk mode, you get something called tunnel vision. I mean, you probably have heard that term before. It's just a hyper focus on the things that are right in front of you. And that's a survival mechanism because when we're in Hulk mode, when we're trying to survive, we don't care about the details. We just want to focus on the thing that's threatening, right? So by engaging your peripheral vision, you can even wave your hands right now in your peripheral vision. You are engaging your Bruce Banner mode. And you're sending a signal to your brain saying, hey, we're safe. Engage your periphery. By engaging your periphery, you're sending that signal. And you don't have to wave your hands. You can just notice it. You can just notice it anywhere. This is another technique that no one will know that you're doing it. Okay. Here's another version, the tense and release. And this has that, it's similar to muscle relaxation, but what it does is it has you tense up all your muscles for as many, for 5 to 10 seconds, as many and as hard as you can, and then it releases everything. What that does is it gives you the extra benefit of discharging energy, like penting it up and then releasing it. Another technique is diaphragmatic breathing. So you've likely heard of diaphragmatic breathing. It's belly breathing. You're breathing with your diaphragm as opposed to breathing with your shoulders. And what's remarkable about diaphragmatic breathing is why it works. So when you breathe with your belly, with your diaphragm, you're actually compressing your vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve, as some of you may know, is what controls your heart rate and essentially your sense of calm. By pushing on your vagus nerve, you are lowering your heart rate and you are literally sending a signal, kind of like a calm button, that you are safe. So diaphragmatic breathing does that. It's so cool. So if you're having trouble diaphragmatically breathing, here's a cool hack that I learned. Put your hands in the back of your head like this, which feels good, by the way, like stretches out your arms. Okay. But by doing this, you actually cannot breathe with your shoulders. See? Try breathing. You have to breathe diaphragmatically when your hands are like this way. So take a few deep breaths. You're pushing on your vagus nerve right now. They discovered this, so EMTs discovered this when heart attack patients would come into the ER and they would tell them to bear down on their pelvic area, kind of like releasing the muscles in the pelvic area. And they realized that it was actually pushing on the vagus nerve. And what that would do is they would lower the patient's heart rate and increase their chances of survival. So, diaphragmatic breathing, it works. Okay, so those were some of the techniques that you can do, and you can do them wherever. Like maybe not the wet noodle game all the time, but maybe, you know, maybe. So these things, again, you cannot just do them once and then have that work for the rest of your day, but these are things that you can do to maintain yourself, to maintain and to catch yourself from getting too stressed out, to catch yourself from getting into Hulk mode. So in the last part of this webinar, I'm going to talk about how to apply the trauma-informed approach. And this is a term that's kicked around a lot in professional groups that work with people. And it's beginning to be a really popular term right now, being trauma-informed. And what that means is, in a nutshell, is that it's realizing that human beings have a Bruce Banner mode and a Hulk mode, and that in order to get them to do well, in whatever we want them to do, whatever they want to do, they have to be in Bruce Banner mode. And in order to do that, you can't just keep on stressing them out, right? It's that simple. That you're actually not going to get great behavior or great results from adding stress to people. I mean, it's a really simple concept, but imagine, I mean, it's kind of new because, I mean, geez, some of the systems that are out there to help families are really hulky, right? Like do this first, then this, then this, then this, and do this all at once. And then here's the list of things you have to do. Yeah, well, that is not getting you into Bruce Banner mode, right? That's getting you to Hulk mode. And then you can't think clearly. And then you're irritable. And then you hate everything, right? So, because you're in Hulk mode. So the trauma-informed approach is just how to work with people in a way that invites them back into their Bruce Banner mode so that we can get things done and be the people that we want to be. That's it. So these things can be used whether you're working with your kids or working with your friends who are stressed out or working with anyone. It's just like this is a human approach to dealing with stress. So the first tip that you see here is work on your own self-regulation. So work to get yourself back into Bruce Banner mode as much as possible. Because like I said before, you cannot help someone be calm and be in their Bruce Banner mode if you are not also in Bruce Banner mode. Like your kid cannot out calm you. If you're stressed out, that's the baseline level of stress that everyone else is going to be. They cannot be more calm than you because you have the power, right? Because you're the mom. Everything revolves around you. So your sense of calm will determine the level of calm that other people can be. So the most important thing that you can do is take care of yourself. I know that you know that, but do you practice that? Like self-care is really helping you be able to practice self-regulation and be the kind of person that you want to be. And it looks different for everyone, but self-care is the most important thing that you can do. It is the most important thing. Okay, the second thing is to practice intentionality. And this is just really knowing who you want to be. What are your values? What doesn't matter so much? That's great. It's great when you know what you value and then what doesn't really matter. Like for me, material wealth just does not matter. Like I get all my clothes at thrift stores and I don't feel like I feel great about that. Like because frugality and being able to save money or to save the planet uh and to kind of be resourceful and repurpose clothing, that is like that's one of my values. I don't like new stuff. Uh and that's great. Like that's a point of pride for me. Whereas someone else might be like, "Ooh, that's not in my value. I don't want to wear other people's clothes, right? Whatever." But because I know that about myself, um, and I know what I value, that helps me know who I am and why I want to get back into Bruce Banner mode. So knowing who you are is knowing what you're working towards maintaining. And sometimes when I'm going against my own values, like for example, another value is connection and community. If I'm distancing myself from my community, if I'm not really picking up the phone when people call me, or if I am just not really wanting to connect with people, that's usually a sign that I'm in Hulk mode. And it's a cue to me to start practicing self regulation. The third tip is think about your thoughts and your behaviors, your posture, your tone of voice, and even the environment that you're within. Think about who that is inviting to the table. Is it inviting Hulk or is it inviting Bruce Banner? Sometimes the way in which you say things, the way in which your posture is, that might be inviting Bruce Banner or Hulk to the table if you're having a conversation. Like if I was your supervisor at work and I came to you and said, "Okay, we have to have a performance review about your behavior." Imagine if I said that. That is inviting you to be in Hulk mode. Is that inviting you to be calm? No, right? It's a like that choice of words and that tone of voice and that posture that I just did for 3 seconds, that is inviting Hulk to the table. That's not inviting Bruce Banner. A way to invite Bruce Banner to the table for that situation is to be like, "Hi, it's time for your performance review. Don't worry, it's something that we do every year, and I'm really looking forward to celebrating your strengths and to work and to determine what your goals are for this year." Like that's a completely different way of pitching the performance review, right? So think about who you're inviting to the table. Number 4, if you're helping a friend specifically who has been through something that's been traumatic to them, you don't need to get them to share every detail with you. So you don't need to have them retell their story to you in order to help them. Because what that does is when you're retelling a story of trauma, your brain doesn't know the difference between experiencing it and remembering it. It's going back in there. So it's likely that what it's doing is it's triggering Hulk mode when you go through the details of a painful memory or experience. So instead, so you don't have to ask them for details. Instead, focus on the things, focus on the effects that that trauma is having on them right now. Can you teach them the techniques that you learned today, whether it's diaphragmatic breathing or muscle relaxation? And give them brief and vivid examples about how good adaptation works. So, if you found something that really helped you when you're feeling stressed out, give them that example. Be like, "This has really helped me, and you know what? I've gotten a lot of hope from it, and it's really helped, and it's changed my life." When we can give hope to people who are in despair, that is the best thing that we can do. So try not to stay in the swamp with them, especially now. If your friend is coming to you and saying, "I am just really, really struggling, and I don't think that this pandemic is ever going to get better, and I think this is going to have a really long-term detrimental effect on me and my family, and I just don't know how we're going to survive this." I recommend and I encourage you to be a hope bringer in that sense. What that means is not just acknowledging her feelings, like, which is important. Be like, "Yeah, it's super hard." Don't keep on adding to the lack of hope. Don't be like, "Yeah, and also like the pandemic is really spreading and it's really scary because of," like adding to that lack of hope is actually not necessary. Instead, focus as much as possible on hopeful things. You know what? Yeah, but I've been seeing remarkable adaptation in people, and I've been hearing some stories. Like actually, I've been hearing stories about parents that are feeling closer to their children because of this pandemic, because they have more time to spend with them, and they're reading more books together, and they're having more family time, and there's actually more harmony. So, anyways, give examples of hope, because when one is in despair, they actually don't need more despair. They need hope. Okay. The fifth thing is when you're working to help someone be back into their Bruce Banner mode, you have to like them. I know this may seem inauthentic because sometimes it is the people that are least likable that are in the most Hulk mode. Like it's typically someone is not, typically the reason why someone is not likable is because they're in Hulk mode. But it's because they're in Hulk mode that they really need to be liked. Because how do you feel when someone doesn't like you? You probably feel pretty hulky, right? Like what the hell? Like they, why don't they like me? Like that's ugh, you know. So you start getting threatened by their lack of liking you. But when you behave in a way that demonstrates to someone that you like them, it can transform them. Because what that does is it creates the space for them to be in Bruce Banner mode. So choose to like them. Try that on. Next, and this is kind of ironic because I'm giving you a list right now, but one thing at a time. When you're working with someone to try to change a behavior or to create a new behavior, one thing at a time. And that's because when we focus on one thing and achieving that one thing, it gives us a boost of confidence that we can do it. And then we can move on to the second thing. When you get a whole long list of what you need to do, it's overwhelming. It can be threatening and it puts you into Hulk mode. And when you're in Hulk mode, you can't accomplish a damn thing anyways. And lastly, focus on strengths. Focus on strengths. Even when someone comes to you with a tale of woe, all right, with a tale of stress, see if you can find the strengths in their story. So, for example, I had a friend that came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, Claire, I feel like a horrible mom. Yesterday, I was on a conference call and I was trying to work from home, and also my 3-year-old was trying to play, which is a common thing now. And so I gave her a pack of gummy bears and a juice box for lunch, and that was her lunch. I feel awful about it. Like, what the heck? I am the worst mom." Okay. Here is an example of not focusing on strengths. I could have responded to her like this: "Oh yeah, that's a lot of sugar. And that's really bad for her teeth. And also that's gonna make her hyper. It's gonna make it worse." That is not focusing on strengths. It's just like exacerbating her story. The thing is, I mean, all of that is true, right? But I don't need to say that because that's not going to help her. It's not going to help her be in Bruce Banner mode and make good long-term choices, right? What she needs in that situation is empathy. Here's a way that I could be focusing on strengths. You are doing so much right now. The fact that you're trying to work from home and also needing to parent, that's an impossible task. So please give yourself a break. Also, it's not going to kill her to have had a package of gummy bears and a juice box for lunch. The fact that you even care about that means that you care about nutrition. It's not something that you're going to do every single day. Give yourself a break. You see, I didn't like endorse the behavior. It's whatever. Like that's fine. I give her gummy bears every day. But what that does is it focuses on her strengths, that she's doing a lot and that she really cares about nutrition. So you see how that's a reframe? Reframe to focus on strengths, because it's those strengths that are going to help people solve their challenges. It's not going to be your pointing out of their weaknesses that are going to change them. If you're interested in helping families, like families in your community, uh, find a sense of support during this time, especially now, go to pcaaz.org/support. And there you're going to find this resource guide. And it's check-in questions for that you can ask to families in your life, like, how are you doing? Because that kind of sense of support and checking in with them and offering just a listening ear or empathy might be the difference between their overwhelm and their ability to cope. So feeling a sense of connection is really, really good for human beings, really good for our Bruce Banner mode. And it also gives some resources that you can connect them to if they're struggling with things like housing or food, or if they're having a mental health like crisis, or if they're really feeling down. There are resources there that you can refer them to that are trustworthy. And then at the very end of it, if you do suspect that there is child abuse or neglect, um, please do call the DCS hotline if you suspect that there's abuse and neglect. Um, I don't say that first because I do think that community is the answer first, and supporting each other, supporting rather than reporting. But if you do actually suspect abuse or neglect, it is important that we get that family some help. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for watching this webinar. I hope that you got something from it. I encourage you to check out the Prevent Child Abuse Arizona website at pcaaz.org. We have a lot of information and resources there, and you can just get connected to who we are and what we do. And if you have any questions about this content, my email is right there. I'd be happy to connect with you. So back to you, Michelle.
Claire, thank you so much. That was so impactful, and you put a lot of information in a 1 hour session. Like, very impressive. One of the things that I really loved, so even though on Dames, like, we offer our members guided meditations, and it's usually something that always comes up on these lists of things that you can do. I almost kind of like that it wasn't on your list because I think guided meditations are kind of one of those maintenance things that help you maintain a a typical stress level. But I love that the tips that you gave us today, especially these like relaxation ones, were kind of quick, like the things that you need to do in that minute to calm yourself
Yes.
down.
Yes, I need quick and easy. I've tried to meditate before, like, consistently, and I just drop off. Like, these are things you can do in literally 2 seconds. Yeah.
Yes. And that's often really what we need because
Yes.
the things that are happening around us are happening very quick, and they're like, or they're a long thing. I mean, my kids could have meltdowns for half an hour, but it's like, how do you get through that? I'm not going to go onto the website and like listen to a guided meditation while
Exactly.
I feel down.
Yes. Yeah.
So I love having these, and I really appreciate what you said about, if we want to get our kids out of Hulk mode, we cannot be in Hulk mode. And I think we get into Hulk mode very easily because we're so primed. So I thought that was really great. And it took me a long time to get to that space. But now when my daughter has a meltdown, I literally like sit next to her to make sure she doesn't harm herself. And I do deep breathing exercises.
Wow. That is so awesome. But it's totally counterintuitive, right? You're like, ah, because your body wants to go into like threat mode because it's like it's stressful. But instead you're like, nope, you do the opposite. That's remarkable.
Yeah, well, and it was when I started doing it, she would get even angrier. She would be like, "Stop breathing, mommy!" But now she'll start breathing with me. Like, now if she gets upset and I sit next to her and I start doing it, she'll sit there and she'll be like,
Awesome.
"Feel better,
That is a
baby." Yeah.
huge win.
Yeah, exactly. So I really love that because I think it takes us a long time to have those realizations. But once we have them and once we see them in use, and we see that if we are calm, cool, and collected going in, and we can remain there, which is hard because at some point, your lid wants to flip. But the longer we can stay like this and like keep it together, the better. And I love that there were a lot of different mechanisms in there. And I've always heard the deep belly breathing, but I've never actually heard anybody give me the scientific explanation of why. And I was like, makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
I love
I
that.
need I need the scientific explanation of why. I don't want it, I need it to work. So
Yeah. No, I love that. I thought that was very cool. And then all of the other kind of more maintenance things at the end, I know that a lot of our members on Dames are advocates, or they're kind of in that realm of helping other parents.
yeah.
And so I think that those practical things that we can do, because sometimes it's hard because we're so attached to that stress too, to not go into the commiseration mode, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's not harmful to just be in the swamp together. But if someone is really in despair, they also need to like they need some hope because that's the ingredient that is necessary to pull yourself out of it. You need to have you need to understand that there is a possibility of a positive outcome. But when you don't have hope, and you don't have that, there's no reason to get back into Bruce Banner mode.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time today and all of the resources. I just got to like scan that resource guide while it was up, and that looks amazing. And I think that as we're also worried about how our children are doing, we might not be able to tease out of them how stressed they are. So
Mhm.
I love that there was like a list of questions that we could ask our kids to help us gauge that. Is that I'm
Yeah.
understanding that form correctly, right?
Yes, a lot of them are formed for like someone who is in a different family, like checking with a child who you might be working with, but you can totally adapt those questions to your own children. And
Yeah.
remember, your children do not need to be traumatized by this pandemic. I just want to make sure because I'm getting a lot of moms especially who are really worried that it's going to cause inevitable trauma. It does not have to, and it probably won't because you're asking that question. Like the fact that you care, it doesn't mean that this is going to be a traumatic experience. Again, you are the difference between a traumatic experience and one that is just stressful.
Yes, amen. I totally agree with that. I know for our family, it has honestly kind of been a blessing. Like, we get to spend time with each other, we have played with each other. I had a full like 2 months where I didn't have a therapist in my house, and it was like just family. And it was like the most, and it's been 5 years since we have experienced that kind of togetherness where we weren't interrupted constantly by therapies. And so, for us it was really kind of like this really nice blessing of like, oh, like I'm not rushing to an appointment and I'm not rushing to get you here and there, and we're just being for a little bit, which was nice.
Michelle, yes. In fact, what that makes me think is maybe maybe this is controversial, but like maybe everything that we're adding to our lives are really helping us cope with a life that we could just, you know, if we just slowed down, we wouldn't need all these coping mechanisms. You know what I mean? Like maybe what the answer is family and community
Yeah.
and like more time to do that as opposed to kind of trying to cope and intervene with all the problems that we're forming really because we're so fast paced and yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I I
wondering.
I do, I agree. I think that as we kind of reopen or like get back into that flow, I think there's going to be a lot of questions about what are we getting back into, and do we want to get back into that
Right,
chaotic
right,
flow or not?
right. Because we need to cope with that.
Yes.
Like we're creating things to cope with.
Yeah,
Why don't we
exactly.
just not create those things? Like the hustle culture, the rush culture, it hurts. It's like I mean, we're a Hulk inducing culture.
Yes. Yeah,
That's not good.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, I think it's definitely an interesting like side note.
Yes.
but
Yeah.
but definitely a reevaluation of, I guess, how we proceed,
Yes.
you know.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your contact information with families. I am so happy that I have gotten to know you, and just so thrilled that you were able to come on and give us this presentation today.
It is my pleasure, and thank you so much for what you do.
All
Okay,
right, we'll
Michelle.
see you around.
All right.